What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today, we're coming at you with our second 2024 NFL mock draft. We did this exercise about a week and a half ago, prior to the start of NFL free agency. And wouldn't you know it, after a week, there have been major changes, big time signings, big time trades. So as a result, we have to update this. Now, quick note, this will be the last mock draft without trades. But no worries, every single future mock draft we do will include them, so keep an eye out for that. But other than that, sit back, relax, enjoy, and if you do, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree? Who do you want your favorite team to select? But with that being said, let's dive into it. The 101 starts with the Chicago Bears, and no matter how many mock drafts you see, this will be the pick, and every single one of them, it will be Caleb Williams. Justin Fields is no longer a member of the Chicago Bears, but we even told you while he was still technically on the roster, it would be Caleb Williams. The Bears are not going to pass up a generational talent at the quarterback position and finally get that position addressed. This will be Caleb Williams, and, that's the easiest pick in this entire draft. Then we go to Washington, and here, again, it will be a quarterback. I think it will come down to two quarterbacks, namely one Drake May and then Jaden Daniels of LSU. And I said this last time, I think Daniels has the higher upside that people are attracted to. He is kind of becoming the favorite as the second quarterback to go. So I'm going to keep in line with that, and I'm going Daniels to Washington. Then we've got the New England Patriots, and this is one of the few teams that didn't make a move for a quarterback in free agency, whether it was, looking at Justin Fields, Kirk Cousins, Sam Howell, Russell Wilson. A lot of quarterbacks moved. Patriots didn't really do anything there other than signing Jacoby Brissett. That's not the long-term solution, so they will be selecting a quarterback. Question is, are they going to stay put at 3? Or are they going to trade down and select one of these quarterbacks afterwards? But since we're not doing any trades, I'm going to go with a quarterback here, and I'm going to go with Drake May, my next best available quarterback. Then we go to the Arizona Cardinals at 4. Here, they're going Marvin Harrison. I think just clearly at this point in time, the best available wide receiver and arguably player. So they go with, again, the top player in some people's minds in the entire draft. Marvin Harrison to the Cardinals, especially without Marquise Brown, a really nice fit. Then we go to the Chargers, and the big thing with the Chargers is they were in cap hell. Look, they had to restructure deals for Khalil Mack, for Bosa, but then they also had to cut Mike Williams and trade away Keenan Allen to the Chicago Bears. So their wide receivers right now, Josh Palmer, Quinn Johnston. Johnston hasn't exactly shown it during his time in the league. Now, you could still argue they could go offensive lineman. They could go tight end. They did lose Gerald Everett, so Brock Bowers could be in play here. But I think wide receiver, a little bit more of an impact as far as the pass catchers are concerned. So to me, it's going to be Malik Neighbors. A lot of people have Malik Neighbors right there with Marvin Harrison. So either way, I think it's a good situation for the Chargers. Then we go to the New York Giants, and this one is interesting because I think with their first pick, it's either going to be a wide receiver or a quarterback. And there's been steam lately that they're looking at J.J. McCarthy. I mean, they've been linked with potential trade ups to, try and land a Daniels, to try and land a Drake May maybe. But in this scenario, we're not trading down. And I want to try and be somewhat realistic because if, we have, let's say, for example, J.J. McCarthy falling out of the top 10, I really don't think that'll happen in the actual draft. Somebody will trade up for him. And I'm not saying that he's necessarily going to go to the Giants, but again, Giants are going either quarterback or wide receiver, in my opinion, so I don't think this is completely insane. I'm going to go with J.J. McCarthy, following some of the signs with their interest in him. So you got a new quarterback there, even though Daniel Jones is still on the squad. That signing hasn't worked out, so they're looking to move on. for the Titans here, I think this is a no-brainer. If Joel Alt is available, they're going to pull the trigger on the best offensive lineman in this draft. They need help on that offensive line, so this is a no-brainer. Then we go to the Atlanta Falcons. Now, another kind of big swing here. Prior to this updated version, we had them going quarterback, no more, because they got Kirk Cousins. They've got really decent offensive pieces in place, from wide receiver to tight end to running back, decent offensive line as well. So I think they're going to be going defense here, and I think it's probably going to be an edge rusher. So I'm just going straight to the top edge rusher in the class, Dallas Turner, to the Atlanta Falcons. Now we go to the Chicago Bears, and at 9, them picking again, considering how little draft picks they have, this is going to be a very popular spot for them to trade down. But again, since they're staying put, you can argue that they could still go wide receiver, and that's the argument I'm going to make here, because Rome Odunze is the last kind of elite wide receiver left out of the top 3. And sure, you traded for Keenan Allen, but there's still been no extension. 32 years old for Keenan Allen, injury history, and I think he's a short-term solution. So to me, you add Odunze, even if he's the wide receiver 3 this year, he could very well be the wide receiver 2 and challenging DJ Moore in the not-so-distant future. So I think this is a move that would make a lot of sense. And if this is how the Bears start their draft, A+ for them. Now, next we go to the New York Jets here, and they're another team that addressed some needs in free agency, but I still think that there were short-term solutions, namely at offensive line. So Fuaga from Oregon State, I think, makes a lot of sense. Fotano does as well from Washington. I think it's a coin flip after Joe Alt. So to me, I'm going to go with a slightly higher ranked guy here with Fuaga, and we move on. Now with the Minnesota Vikings, kind of the big news for them since our last mock draft is, yes, they've lost Kirk Cousins, but they have also traded for another first-round pick. So now they have the 11th and the 23rd overall selections in the first round, which to me means that, they're more than likely going to make a move for a quarterback to try and trade up into the top 10. However, J.J. McCarthy, not available. And I don't think that the Vikings are going to select a Bo Nix or a Penix at this point in time. I think it's a little bit too early for either one of those guys. And you're going to hear me say that when we look at teams like the Broncos and the Raiders as well. So because of that, I think you turn your attention to potentially the defense, looking at that defensive line. They lost some edge rushers. I think that you could potentially see them, look to fortify that position a little bit. And somebody like a Jared Verse would make sense. Latu would make sense as well. I think Verse has the higher, athleticism, so maybe teams are attracted with that situation. I'm going to go with Verse here for the Minnesota Vikings. Next up, we've got the Denver Broncos. And again, obviously moving on from Russell Wilson, haven't really done anything through the draft to try and address that situation. So to me, it's going to be one of those things where they are probably going to be in the market for a quarterback, but again, not this early if J.J. McCarthy isn't there. Maybe they trade down. So instead, we're going to look at potentially edge rusher, potentially cornerback. And look, I think both of those are very viable. I'm going to go with edge rusher. I think it's a little bit more a higher end position, more at a premium. I'm going to go Latu here for the Denver Broncos. Next up, we are looking at the Raiders. And again, they could use a quarterback. They didn't really do anything long-term wise with the quarterback situation. Sure, Gardner Minshew, but again, not a long-term solution. So here, yes, they lost Josh Jacobs, but too early for a running back. I think that the defensive line can be addressed, but I think you also look at the cornerback position, and this is probably right around where that cornerback run could begin. I'm looking at Quinion Mitchell. I am looking at guys like a Nate Wiggins, Terrion Arnold. Uh, Honestly, right now at this point in time, the separation between the top cornerbacks isn't all that clear. So a coin flip type of situation, I'm going to go in this mock draft version, go with Mitchell. Could very well be different in future scenarios as some of these visits become more clear. Next up, we go to the New Orleans Saints. And with the Saints, I think here you could potentially look at wide receiver. I think that obviously with Michael Thomas leaving, you're kind of left with Chris Olave, right? You could potentially look at offensive line as well. And to me, it's going to be one of those situations, at least if the board plays out the way it has here. And offensive line is very tempting, I'm not going to lie. But so is going a wide receiver like a Brian Thomas, especially a local guy from LSU. A lot of people are very, very high on Brian Thomas. And I could see the Saints falling in love with the situation. I'm not going to lie, it's going to be very tough to pass up on Fotano here. And I'm really between these two scenarios. I'm kind of weighing this in the moment, and I think the value for Fotano at offensive line is just a little bit too good. So I'm going to go with that situation there. It's a deep wide receiver class, so I think there's going to be better value afterwards at that position. And then for the Indianapolis Colts, this is going to be maybe a little bit of a boring pick, but I said it last time. If Brock Bowers falls, this pairing with the Indianapolis Colts just seems like a good fit. Anthony Richardson to Brock Bowers, getting that versatile, big-time tight end, highest touted tight end since Kyle Pitts, and I think he's a better overall tight end as well. So to me, I'm going Brock Bowers in this situation. Next up, we go to the Seattle Seahawks, and they got hit across some offensive line losses in free agency. They could also go with an edge rusher. They could go with a linebacker, but I think it's too early for linebacker. I also think that the top edge rushers have also kind of been selected. So that leads me back to the offensive line. And I think this is where we could see the interior of the offensive line start to go, whether that's a Jackson Powers Johnson, whether that is, somebody like a Zach Frazier. There's a good amount of possibilities here. And I'm probably going to go with the center and Powers Johnson here. Again, we could go with guards, a lot of possibilities here. So I think if things play out like this, it's going to be on the offensive line and the interior of it. Next up, we have got the Jacksonville Jaguars. So they lose Calvin Ridley, and you could potentially look to fix that situation. Sure, you've got Gabe Davis there, but I don't love that signing for them, but I do think they have some more pressing needs. Again, the interior of the offensive line to me makes sense here. And looking at it, somebody like a Zach Frazier, definitely a possibility. Looking at some of these other names here, I think it's going to be offensive line or potentially defensive back. Those are going to be the top two contention picks. I'm going to go with Zach Frazier here and then move on. Next up, we have got the Cincinnati Bengals. And look, again, I think this is a team where you lost some help across the offensive line. Go replace it with another tackle. And we're going to go with Fashanu here from Penn State. I think he's a little bit more raw, but he's still a good selection. Could, though, be a J.C. Latham, Mims. I think Barton's a more like a guard type of situation potentially, but we'll see. We're going to go for Fashanu here, though. Next up, boy, oh boy, the big news with the Rams is Aaron Donald retiring. That is the biggest news here. And because of that, I think interior of the defensive line, whether you like Newton from Illinois or Byron Murphy from Texas. I'm a little bit higher on Byron Murphy, so I'm going to go with the potential replacement for Aaron Donald. Now, the Pittsburgh Steelers are next up. They need a wide receiver. They shipped out Deontay Johnson to the Carolina Panthers in a deal that I think for them wasn't all that great, but Deontay Johnson kind of disgruntled, so it is what it is. Quarterback, they made a lot of moves. They added Russell Wilson and then also traded for Justin Fields. So I don't think quarterback is a need anymore. So to me, I'm turning my attention to wide receiver. And, there's still some wide receivers left out there in free agency, maybe a Mike Williams, maybe a Hunter Renfrow, a Tyler Boyd. We'll see. But I think right now I'm going with Brian Thomas. Really like the upside. Next up, Miami Dolphins. You need offensive line. You need offensive line because you got gutted at that position in free agency. You lost some pretty good interior offensive linemen. So I think here Graham Barton makes sense, like I alluded to before. I'm going to go with Graham Barton to the Miami Dolphins. Afterwards, we've got the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, here, I think we could be looking at the secondary. I said it last time. I stand by it still. They added Saquon Barkley. Not that it was really all that needed. Sure, you could add some help on the offensive line, potentially defensive line as well with some retirements, potentially with Reddick not coming back. So that's a possibility. But I think, again, we've gotten to the point where, if it's edge, maybe it's Chop Robinson, something like that. But I think he's kind of more of a late first round, early second rounder. So I'm looking at cornerback, and Cooper DeJean is a guy that very, very versatile. And I think that you can play him in a lot of different situations. So I'm going to give him here to the Philadelphia Eagles. Next up, we've got the Minnesota Vikings. So this is their second selection. With their first selection, they went edge rusher. In our mock here, I think we can go to probably the defensive back situation. A guy that I like, Terrion Arnold, is still available. You could also go interior defensive line with Newton from Illinois. I'm going to go with Arnold here, though. I think both would be up for consideration. Next up, we've got the Dallas Cowboys, and they could go offensive line as well. They could go, they could potentially go linebacker with some retirements they've had there. The running back situation, also unclear, but I'm going offensive line. Lost talent there during free agency. You need to continue to upgrade it. So JC Latham, I am pairing up here with the Dallas Cowboys. Next up, we've got the Green Bay Packers. And again, Packers are, I think, going to be a team where you either go on the offensive line or on the defensive line, just basically in the trenches, however. Losing Bakhtiari, mainstay there. Last couple of years, he's been injured. So what about getting a potential replacement with an Amarius Mims? I like that situation for the Green Bay Packers. Next up, we have got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And here, I think, interior of the offensive line makes sense as well. Let's see who's left on that interior offensive line. There's still some tackle talent with Guyton, with Morgan. Maybe you can try and have a situation where you flip things around, because I think the talent at tackle right now is still better than what we've got on the interior of the offensive line. So that's a possibility, but I'm going to go cornerback here. It's another area of need. I'm going Kool-Aid McKinstry. Again, we're still in that situation where I think the separation between the top cornerbacks not all that much. Next up, we go to the Arizona Cardinals. Look, they went ahead and added Marvin Harrison. Now I think go on the defensive line. I think this is a good spot for Newton from Illinois in the interior of that line. Makes sense to me. I think best player available is a situation where the Arizona Cardinals are in. Then we go to the Buffalo Bills. Here, losing somebody like a Gabe Davis, they added Curtis Samuel, but that doesn't really do much for me. Stephon Diggs, another year older, still kind of disgruntled. So you could potentially go wide receiver here. I think looking at somebody like an Adonai Mitchell, Troy Franklin maybe. I'm going to go with Mitchell here as that kind of big wide receiver for them. Next up, we go to the Detroit Lions, and they've done a pretty good job in free agency, adding some value pieces, bulking up defense, things like that. I think here they can look at the cornerback position. Nate Wiggins is a good value at this point in time, so I'm going to stop that fall there. Then we go to the Baltimore Ravens. They've lost some help on the offensive line. They've lost help at the wide receiver position. So I think you're adding another wide receiver in this draft makes a lot of sense. Potentially a Troy Franklin, potentially somebody like a Keon Coleman, a little bit of a bigger, more physical wide receiver. Not rated as high here on PFF, but I think he's going to be a late first round, early second round selection. So he's somebody that I think makes sense for the Ravens. Then we go to the 49ers. Cornerback, offensive line. I had offensive line for them last time around. I think I'm going to stick with that. I'm going with Tyler Guyton for them. And then finally, the Kansas City Chiefs. They signed Marquise Brown, which was a really nice move, but it's a one-year deal, so you could still say, they could use some help there, but it's not as big of an area as need. I think offensive line here makes sense. And Jordan Morgan is a good value again. So to me, that's going to be a little bit of a slight change. But to me, I think at the end of the day, wide receiver or offensive line for the Kansas City Chiefs. But with that, we wrap up this first round of our latest 2024 NFL mock draft. Let us know your thoughts. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear in the comment section. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.